Thanks to the startup Aircela, everyone could produce their own gasoline in the future, and from air, no less. According to the startup, a device the size of a refrigerator could produce 3.8 liters of gasoline per day. At current prices, that wouldn't be a bad idea, right? That's why I took a closer look, as always, with a critical eye, to see if the technology is really as promising as the startup claims, how the device actually works, and whether we will actually be making gasoline at home soon. You'll find out in this video, and with that, welcome to the German Science Guy. I'm Dr. Jakob Beautemps, and in Germany we say Los geht's. Oil and gasoline prices have risen sharply. By early April, they have risen by $1 per gallon in the US, or even 40 cents per liter in Germany, which is 1.51 euro per gallon. And that's where the startup Aircela enters the game. Its technology makes gasoline prices completely independent of oil and wars. The company aims to produce gasoline from the air. We'll get to how that works in a moment. Let's first take a look at exactly what the company is planning. The startup was founded in 2019, and they want to use their technology to filter CO2 from the air and produce gasoline from it, and make it easy for anyone to do it at home. Ultimately, this is nothing more than e-fuels. I visited Europe's largest facility for e-fuels last year, but the small yet significant difference is, with this startup, you can produce e-fuels right at home. According to the company, the gasoline is suitable for all vehicles without the need for retrofitting. According to their statement, the fuel contains no heavy metals, no sulfur, and no ethanol. According to the startup, this technology could produce approximately 3.8 liters of gasoline per day. This would require 10 kilograms of CO2. That would be pretty amazing. You produce your own gasoline and simply store CO2 in the process. On top of that, the company claims the gasoline is of fairly high quality. One measure of gasoline quality is the octane rating. Generally speaking, the higher the octane rating, the higher the quality of the fuel. Today, gas stations mostly offer 95 to 98 octane, and in some cases even higher. According to the company, Aircela's gasoline also falls within this range, so it could compete with conventional gasoline. The first prototype was unveiled back in May of last year, and the first units are set to hit the markets in the US by the end of this year, even so initially only in limited quantities. But I have to say, the whole thing sounds very promising and the media loves it. But we really need to take a critical look at it, which of course we will do. And the first question is, how does the technology actually work? Essentially, the process consists of 4 steps. In the first step, the device uses a fan to draw in ambient air. The air is then passed through a chamber. There, the CO2 is captured by a liquid absorber. Aircela plans to use a potassium hydroxide solution as an absorber. Potassium hydroxide reacts very easily with CO2 and is frequently used as an absorber. In addition to CO2, however, hydrogen is also needed. In the second step, the company plans to extract this quite simply from water via electrolysis. In electrolysis, there are 2 electrodes, the cathode and the anode, in a vessel containing water. At the negatively charged electrode, the cathode, water is split into OH- and a hydrogen molecule. And at the anode, the OH- then reacts back into water and oxygen. In industrial electrolysis, however, other chemicals, such as acids, are added to the water. This is because water does not conduct ions well, and acids are needed to sustain the reaction. In the same step as the electrolysis, the Aircela process regenerates the absorber so that it can be reused. And in the third step, the CO2 and hydrogen are then converted into methanol. This requires 2 main things, a catalyst and the right environmental conditions. Namely, a fairly high pressure of over 50 bar. That is about 20 times the pressure of a car tire. But high temperatures are also required, around 200 to 300 degrees. In this process, CO2 and hydrogen react to form methanol, and water is also produced as a byproduct. And in the final step, the company aims to produce gasoline from the methanol. This is done using the methanol to gasoline process. In this process, the methanol reacts to form hydrocarbon chains. Gasoline is also composed of these hydrocarbon chains. However, to ensure that only chains of the appropriate length are produced, a specific catalyst must be used. The catalyst has a specific structure, so that ultimately only hydrocarbon chains with a length of fewer than 10 carbon atoms are produced, as is the case with gasoline. However, the reaction is highly exothermic, meaning a lot of heat is generated. Nevertheless, the reaction initially requires heat and pressure, specifically about 225 degrees Celsius and a pressure of around 10 bar. So as you can see, there are a lot of technology and chemical processes behind this and a lot of requirements for the whole process. But you also have to say the processes themselves are also pretty well established and are used as a standard in the industry. But it has to be said, with a multitude of processes, there are naturally some drawbacks as well. And of course, we have to look at those too in order to properly assess the technology. As always, we will do that in the big hurdle of this video. It's the part in every of my videos where we look at the limitations of the technology. Before that, just click subscribe and turn on the notifications so you don't miss any more videos and support this channel. In fact, the big hurdle is really big this time. The problem is that the technology consists of so many processes, all of which have their drawbacks. Let's start with electrolysis. The Aircela device is supposed to use plain tap water for electrolysis. Theoretically, that's possible, but the problem is the salts and metals in the water can deposit on the electrodes. This renders them unusable. That's why the industry relies specifically on deionized water. These deposits therefore significantly shorten the lifespan. This leaves the question open as to whether the startup is doing anything about it. The methanol to gasoline process also has some drawbacks. One of these is the heat generated during the reaction. This damages the catalyst. For example, it loses activity as a result of this and due to the carbon deposits. Dissipating the heat is a major challenge in this process. That said, it's important to note that the process itself requires a certain temperature and the conversion of CO2 and hydrogen into methanol also takes place at high temperatures. So perhaps it's possible to use that heat for this purpose, so maybe this is not such a big hurdle. However, I haven't found any information from the company regarding this. Nevertheless, the conditions required for the entire process, from CO2 to gasoline, aren't exactly ideal. You simply need relatively high temperatures and pressures, and that's just for the system installed in a private home, so that also makes it more difficult. It's also worth noting that work is underway on other processes that operate under milder conditions, so perhaps the startup is betting on the wrong horse. A much bigger problem for me, however, is economic viability. A study shows so far the methanol to gasoline process is not economically viable compared to conventional gasoline. For Aircela, however, economic competitiveness with conventional gasoline is still more of a long-term goal. A device like this is said to cost anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000. So depending on the gasoline price, for example in Germany right now it's around €2, which is crazy, it's $2.3 per liter, and if you count 5 liters per 100 kilometers, you could drive between 120,000 and 170,000 kilometers on conventional gasoline for that price of the device alone. But on top of the purchase costs of the device, there's also the electricity needed to run it. And that is probably the biggest problem with this technology. To produce 3.8 liters of gasoline, you would need 75 kilowatt hours of electricity. With those 75 kilowatt hours of electricity, efficient electric cars could easily travel up to 600 kilometers. So Aircela's technology isn't really that efficient. For the sake of completeness, however, it must be noted Aircela is not the only company researching such technologies. ETH Zurich, for example, has developed a similar system, though not for private households, and as mentioned before, last year I visited Neratec, which operates the largest facility in Europe for e-fuels. It's actually close by where I live, and it is already significantly more efficient and more cost efficient. So I would say it's safe to say that all the media reports and TikTok videos might be a bit too optimistic. Home production in particular will probably never make much sense because you can achieve much better efficiency with large-scale plants or just use electric cars. But what do you think of the technology and how do you view this whole debate about e-fuels and gas prices? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious to hear your thoughts, and please watch this video here. Not so many people have watched it yet, but it's super cool. I visited an elevator for ships, which is crazy. It can move 10,000 tons with motors that have less power than a Tesla. And with that, I say auf Wiedersehen, which means goodbye in German. Thank you so much for watching. Your Jacob.